The takeaway here is that George is referencing the Heart of Darkness to reinforce the idea that unspeakable horrors have been practiced here in Asshai, beginning with slavery and getting worse from there. And we'll talk about the Bloodstone Emperor in just a second. So essentially, George wants us to know that it's not just creepy, fantasy, fun and games shenanigans, just fun fantasy world building. The dark magic here is tied to unspeakable misery and horror.
The silver hair of a true Targaryen.
So returning to the text, we read about the narrow valley through the mountains of the Morn that the ash runs through, howling. Demons and dragons and worse apparently make their lairs here, and that kind of sounds like spooky traveler talk. But there are, of course, many clues that dragons do come from Asshai. The question becomes, was the Great Empire of the Dawn one and the same as these Proto-Valyrians? And the other piece of evidence that the Great Empire of the Dawn were the Proto-Valyrians comes from a Game of Thrones, actually. That's right, going back to the first book, and it's Dany's famous Wake the Dragon dream. Ghosts lined the hallway, dressed in the faded raiment of kings. In their hands were swords of pale fire. They had hair of silver, and hair of gold, and hair of platinum, and their eyes were opal and amethyst, tourmaline and jade. So those 4 gemstones, opal, amethyst, tourmaline, and jade, those are 4 out of the 8 gemstones listed as the dynasties of the Great Empire of the Dawn. But let's just think about how this came across to us when we read A Game of Thrones before the World of Ice and Fire existed, before the Great Empire of the Dawn was written about. At that point, these just seem like weird Valyrian ancestors, right? Like they all have Valyrian hair. One of them has purple eyes, and they're all chanting for Dany to wake the dragon. But like I said, only one of them has purple eyes. The other 3 have different color eyes. So who are they? They're not Valyrians. This suggests that George, right from the beginning, was always thinking about other races of dragon lords, perhaps you might say cousin tribes or clans to the Valyrians, ones that didn't make it. And since Dany thinking that dragons first came from Asshai is also in Book 1, this would be George planting the seeds. Remember, he's a gardener. This would be him planting the seeds for eventually explaining those ancient Asshai dragon lords. Now, the fact that these gemstone-eyed ghosts also have swords of pale fire in their hands that obviously match the Azor Ahai legend from Asshai, and perhaps also the idea of the sword Dawn being caught on fire because of that phrase, pale fire. Dawn is always described using the word pale. It's pale as milk glass, it's made from a pale stone, and there's a tower in Starfall called the Pale Stone Sword Tower. So if Dawn were ever to catch on fire, one would imagine it would burn with pale fire. And so all of that is further evidence that George, right from the beginning, was imagining these dragon lords with different eye colors as the ancient Asshai dragon lords, the ancestors of the Valyrians, and thus also Dany's ancestors. So then when George comes along later and writes The World of Ice and Fire, he's gardenering out Asshai and all that Far East stuff. Then he reached back to A Game of Thrones, took the 4 gemstones used in the eyes of those dragon lord ghosts, and used them as 4 of the 8 gemstones of the Great Empire of the Dawn rulers. And by doing so, he's essentially telling us that's who Dany saw, the Great Empire of the Dawn rulers. Those are the kingly dragon lord ghosts. So here I will just point out that one of the main criticisms that I hear about Great Empire of the Dawn theory is that it's all in the World of Ice and Fire. It's not in the main books. But as you can see, ancient dragon lords from Asshai is definitely at least a theory rooted in the main books, and especially in A Game of Thrones, where Dany flat out says it. She flat out says it. It's not even a theory. It's just an idea that may or may not be true that Dany heard. But of course, it becomes a theory when you add in all the Azor Ahai stuff and Bran's vision, etc. So basically, Great Empire of the Dawn theory, the theory is that Great Empire of the Dawn is just the name of the ancient Asshai Proto-Valyrian dragon lords. That's all. That's all it is. That's just him world building out and garnering out the original idea of dragon lords from Asshai. I think I've made my point. Let's move on.
In A Song of Ice and Fire, dragons are amongst the most elegant and deadly creatures in existence. At the start of our story, all that is left of them are their skeletons and petrified eggs. The story that the Valyrians found the dragons within the 14 Flames, the volcanic system on the peninsula, is well known, but much evidence seems to suggest that dragons originated from the Far East.
So, in A Song of Ice and Fire, it's the Bloodstone Emperor, instead of Enoch Bowen, who founds the Church of Starry Wisdom after finding the black stone that fell from space. He then worships it, casting down the true gods, and commits all kinds of psychotic evil. And when we think about the trapezohedron being empowered when it's in the dark, well, the black stone is in Stygia, the heart of shadow, from which the darkness emanates. I mentioned glass candles. They're kind of similar to the trapezohedron in function. And who uses the glass candles? Quaid the Shadowbinder from Asshai, and also Myron the Mage, who may be a member of Starry Wisdom cult, which he may have joined in Old Town, where they have strange sailors' temples, or in Asshai, where he visited. And in fact, the information in the World of Ice and Fire about the Oily Stone and stuff, that comes from Marwyn the Mage. So just like I was saying in the Shadowbinders video, all this stuff in Asshai is basically connected and tied to Long Night matters. And just as the Shining Trapezohedron always shows up right before a big disaster, the Bloodstone Emperor's Blackstone seemingly is the thing that transformed the Shadowlands and I think caused the Long Night. And there may have been other meteor impacts as well, but that's a theory for another video. The Great Empire of the Dawn basically is George's version of Atlantis, or you might even say Numenor, which is based on Atlantis. And so yeah, it would make a lot of sense if the Bloodstone Emperor's Black Meteor is George's version of the Shining Trapezohedron. And as Greyways Tim has taught me, Nephren Ka himself is part of the inspiration for the Bloodstone Emperor. Nephren Ka built a windowless temple around the Shining Trapezohedron so it could always live in the dark, so Nyarlathotep can roam free. And the walls of his tomb are basically inscribed with all of these prophecies that he got, all these visions that he got from the Trapezohedron. He spent all his time scrawling these things into the walls like a madman. And so yes, Stygia is a meteor temple. Theory confirmed. So yeah, the Shadowlands look a bit like Mordor, however, there's not really a city inside of Mordor. However, in the mountains surrounding Mordor, called Ephel-Duath, which means Mountains of Shadow, we do find a city built all of black stone, one which was a stronghold for Sauron's forces and the Nazgul. And that city, of course, would be Minas Morgul, formerly Minas Ithil. And so right away you can see that George used Morgul as a Valyrian word in his story. It's both the name of a dragon, Morgul, who is a black dragon per the canon artwork from Fire and Blood. And of course he's black because it's a black city in the Mountains of Shadow in Tolkienverse. And then more widely known, of course, is the phrase Valar Morghulis, which means all men must die. It's kind of funny what George did here. Valar means men, even though Tolkien's Valar are the gods. They are not the men, they're the highest gods of the world. So in Sindarin, Morgul means black magic or dark sorcery. And Tolkien, who is a linguist, is drawing off the Latin root word mors, which is the French mort, and that's where we get mortality, morgue, and so on and so forth. So the Valyrian Morghulis means die or to die or must die, but if we translate Valar Morghulis into Sindarin, we get the dark sorcery of the gods, the dark magic of the Valar. And that's exactly what we've got in Stygia. Again, some sort of evil god casting a shadow over the Shadowlands. And then just going a little further on Tolkien's linguistics, the Sindarin root word of Morgul supposedly is Morn, and that's a shortening of the Sindarin Morn, which means black. So that's why Mordor is the Black Land. Mordu means Black Knight. Morgul, again, black arts or dark sorcery. There's Mormogil, the nickname for Turin Blacksword, who carried a black sword. That means black sword, Mormogil. Mornin means dark veil, and that means the mountains of the Morn, just east of Asshai. Well, those are actually the Black Mountains, and indeed they are. And then finally, there's a later Sindarin version of Morn, which is Vorn, and that also means black, so Vorian Dane, the sword of the evening, everyone. George is a big fan of Tolkien. Every single building and even the streets are made of the same substance, which is the mysterious oily or greasy black stone. The oily stone and greasy stone terms are used interchangeably, so that's the same thing. The Targaryens of Dragonstone didn't seem to save much Valyrian sorcery from the downfall of the Freehold. No glass candles, no dragonbinder hellhorns, no more making of Valyrian steel, no more using horrific blood magic sorcery to create monstrous new human-animal hybrids. Now, you can see why they might decide, yeah, no more of the Island of Dr. Moreau stuff, but the candles and the dragon horns and the Valyrian steelmaking knowledge definitely seem like useful things to hold on to, right?
There have been hints throughout the series and the Duncan Egg novellas to suggest that Targaryens do have a tolerance to heat, highlighted on several occasions. Maybe when they reached the stream, he'd have a soak. He smiled, thinking how good it would feel to jump right in and come up sopping wet and grinning, with water cascading down his cheeks and through his tangled hair, and his tunic clinging sodden to his skin. Egg might want a soak as well, though the boy looked cool and dry, more dusty than sweaty. He never sweated much. He liked the heat. In Dorne, he went around bare-chested and turned brown as a Dornishman. It is his dragon blood, Dunk told himself.